On behalf of the Society of Certified Senior Advisors, thanks for joining us for this month's CSA webinar, Successful Aging, Helping Your Clients Be All They Can Be. We have a great presentation for you today. Joining us is Teresa Beshwaite and Lisa Federico. Teresa is a Master of Public Health with experience in the fitness, acute care, and aging fields. She formerly owned and operated an older adult-oriented personal training studio and currently works as the Director of Operations for Masterpiece Living, in which she oversees the daily interactions that actualize their mission. Teresa is also a member of the Masterpiece Analytics team and responsible for Masterpiece Living's first ever partnership with affordable senior housing communities. Lisa is a certified senior advisor and member of the Ethics and Disciplinary Council. She is also a lean management educated executive and a Six Sigma black belt with a BFA in communications with supporting minors in public speaking and creative writing. Lisa is currently the vice president for the Vision Recovery Center in Las Vegas, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting those in need with vision care so they may live more productively and independently. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Travis. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Lisa Federico. I'd like to welcome you to the October webinar. I understand we have a big audience today, and that is such good news to know that successful aging is becoming increasingly important. Teresa and I are delighted with the opportunity to present today's webinar. I think you'll find the information useful, enlightening, and thought-provoking. I invite you now to take a moment to think back to your CSA study manual, the giant manual, or the 4 smaller ones if you're a newer CSA. Perhaps you do remember mention of Masterpiece Living in early chapters or someplace in a class or somewhere in your travels. I personally remember hearing about it years ago and being intrigued and even researching a bit. But it wasn't until I met Teresa about 4 years ago when I was the Community Services Director at a CCRC that I really began to understand Masterpiece Living, that it's a cultural approach to aging based on the belief that as we grow older, more is possible. And that approach and those beliefs have been thoroughly and thoughtfully researched, well-tested, and successfully validated. Teresa, as you've heard from her impressive biography, has so much more to tell you. She's been a real beacon of light and knowledge and support to me, and I know you'll welcome her insight and her expertise, and I'm certain at the end of today's webinar you'll be pleased with what you've learned. I'm hopeful you have the opportunity to share that knowledge with your clients, and on a personal level, I hope you will find success in your own aging journey.
Thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure and an honor to work with you as well. I'm Teresa Beshwaite. I'm very happy to be with all of you today to share a tiny bit about Masterpiece Living and successful aging, the work that we do, the data that tells us that it is working, and I'm happy to offer some thoughts and recommendations about how we each can age successfully ourselves and help our clients to be all that they can be. Our history at Masterpiece Living dates back to Dr. Jonas Salk, who in the 80s challenged the MacArthur Foundation to study what goes right with aging. Why, he said, is all of the research to date related to aging about decline? And why is it that one 82-year-old is on cross-country skis and another is unable to care for themselves? Why don't we study what goes right with aging for a change? And the MacArthur Foundation took him up on his challenge. Dr. Bob Kahn and Dr. Jack Rowe were the co-principal investigators of the MacArthur research on aging, and what they found forever changed everything we knew about aging. Until then, the assumption was that your aging journey depended on the unchangeables, your genetics, your age, your gender, heavily about the genes that you inherited. And in fact, what Doctors Rowe and Kahn found was quite the opposite, that 70% of how we age physically is dependent on the lifestyle choices that we make every single day, and 50% of cognitive aging. Dr. Salk was pleased with those findings when they were presented in Chicago, and he shared a cab ride back to the airport with our chairman, Larry Landry, and he said, you know, research is great. It's earth-shattering what we learned, but unapplied, it will go to waste, and it has to be applied. These findings must be applied. And when Larry Landry could financially, he took that to heart, and he started our company called Masterpiece Living. And our sole purpose is to apply not only that original watershed research, but all of the subsequent research that is occurring every single week and make it come to life. Dr. Salk thought that the most likely place to start would be retirement communities, and that is exactly what we have done, although we've branched out a bit now. Larry's brother, Dr. Roger Landry, came on board in about the year 2000 and has led our company since. His recent book, published in late 2014, is called Live Long, Die Short. That's really the latest research and findings on the topic of successful aging. This is essentially what the MacArthur researchers found, that we are born and we reach peak functioning, and there's some years that are kind of freebie years, cruising altitude. We don't have to put a lot of effort in to maintain our level of functioning being at peak, and then we reach a point of decision, really. We can begin, according to the solid line, a long, slow descent of our functioning, spending about half of our life in a state of slow decline, or we can make those lifestyle choices that the research determined is most likely to result in a live long, die short experience, and that will keep us on the dotted line on this high road to aging. You do see a dip here at the top of the dotted line, and that's the life throws you curveballs dip. We all know that life will throw us curveballs, but the degree to which we are making these choices that we are going to talk about shortly and on that high road to aging, the more likely we will recover well until the end of our life, and that will be a time of what we call in public health compressed morbidity. So the goal, live well, die short, and I think safe to say that is what we all hope for ourselves and also for those who we love. So what does the research say? What are those choices? Well, being physically active and always being mentally stimulated, being a lifelong learner, strong social support, having purpose and meaning in your life. And here's arguably the biggie, environments that support this lifestyle. So truly it is up to us. We are all aging, as we know, and so it's up to all of us to make those healthy choices every single day and encourage those around us to do the same. So Masterpiece Living, 16 years later, we're a group of aging experts, and our goal is to help maximize human potential. We do that by helping our partners develop cultures of successful aging. This is us and our background here, and more importantly, what do? We take the latest research on aging that is coming out regularly. It's really amazing how much research is focused on successful aging these days, and we figure out how to apply it. And we do that by creating education and resources and campaigns and programs and tools, all geared so that our partners can create environments of growth and potential. So here you see a seedling, that would be the older adult. The pot and the soil, that's the environment in which they live. At Masterpiece Living, we think of ourselves as the miracle grow that goes into that pot to help that older adult grow even more expeditiously. And I'd like to challenge you to think of yourself as Miracle-Gro too, because probably you can't change where your clients live and where the older adults in your life live, but you can help be that supportive environment, that Miracle-Gro, that will help them to age more successfully, and we'll talk about that today. This is a glimpse at a few of those tools and campaigns and resources that I mentioned a moment ago. So all of these start in the research. They are pilot tested by our partners who are willing to do some pilot testing for us in various levels of living, and the modifications are applied and then they are released to our partners. So this is what research applied looks like here at Masterpiece Living. The other element of our partners is their generosity. We have about 80 partners, mostly senior living across the country, and they are as different as they are generous. We have some nonprofit, some for-profit. We've done some work in affordable housing. Many of our partners are CCRCs, and the benefit is that generous sharing of ideas and concepts and resources. That's a powerful group of generous people, and collectively it means that we can raise the bar within the Masterpiece Partnership Network, but our goal and our mission is to change the experience and perception of aging. So what's important to us beyond our partnership network is to share what we're learning with the aging field and with aging professionals like yourselves. So let's get to those learning objectives. There are 3 today. The first is that I wanted to share with you a bit about the research and the philosophy behind successful aging. And I have to force myself to pick one bit of research within each of the 4 components in which we focus on at Masterpiece Living. And so I have done that, and I want to talk about ageism and its impact on aging, which is profound in a word, and then focus a bit on environment and expectation and their impact on aging. Let's start with what successful aging is not, though. It's nothing about anti-aging. It is not about chasing that fountain of youth. And it's not shaming, so it's not categorical. If you're not aging successfully, then are you aging unsuccessfully? It's really actually more of a continuum of constantly making choices. It's a never done kind of concept. It has nothing to do with super agers. You see the images of older adults skydiving and parasailing, and that is wonderful. And it's some people's version of successful aging. It is not everyone's version, and that is okay. So there is not a hyper-focus on just the super agers. It's very inclusive. Successful aging has nothing to do with ageism. So if we are accepting ageism, then we are not working toward an environment of successful aging. And it's not an exclusively individual pursuit. It takes a village, and this is about building environments, building organizational cultures where successful aging is more likely to happen. We organize our resources by these 4 components, and of course you have no doubt heard about the 7 or 8 or 12 dimensions of wellness. Dr. Kahn, one of the co-principal investigators of the MacArthur research, remains on our board today. He's fast approaching 100. I think he's about 98 now, if I'm not mistaken. He encourages us to keep things simple, and so we have certainly not disregarded any element of the various wellness dimensions, but we have packaged them into these 4 areas. So physical being the continual growth of physical function, intellectual being new, novel, and complex. That's the tricky part. It's got to be unique to the user, to that participant. Social being a wide range of meaningful relationships. That is going far beyond scratching the social surface, which we tend to see in retirement communities and with older adults. And finally, spiritual, I like to define it as that which brings peace. It's broadly defined as search for purpose, and it certainly includes religion, but is not limited to religion. And the truth is that if we are to grow in any of those 4 areas or all of those 4 areas, it's got to be a little bit uncomfortable. Growth means that we get out of our comfort zone a tiny bit. And I challenge you to, for yourselves in your own lives, how long has it been that you have grown in any of those 4 areas, and how uncomfortable did that feel? And the more we are pursuing our own growth and successful aging, the more authentic it feels when we talk with the older adults that we work with and who we love about their aging journey. And as we encourage them to get uncomfortable, it's always ideal if we can share our own stories as well. It's about this. It's about a belief in one's heart of hearts that anyone can grow regardless of their age, regardless of their stage of life, regardless of where they lay their head at night. So our partners believe that older adults can grow and should grow, no matter if they live in skilled nursing, in assisted living, in memory support, in independent living. And that is critical to our success if we are indeed to change the experience of aging and the perception of aging. Let me bring you just one tidbit from each of those 4 components. This to me is really powerful. Pun intended, I guess. Power is something you don't hear about at all in the fitness realm, and it is, in my mind, the holy grail to preventing falls in older adults. And fitness professionals tend to not know what power is, and so they're not training it, and we're not training it in retirement communities. Power is the ability to exert maximum muscular contraction instantly in an explosive burst of movement. So put differently, it's a quick and strong movement, and we don't train that with older adults. Right? There's 2 elements of power, and that's strength and speed. So for example, if an older adult were about to fall, or any of us were about to fall, what do we need to do in order to prevent that fall? Probably take a very quick step to regain our balance. So that quick step has to both be strong and fast. That is power. That is what we do not train. And according to this graph, we lose power as we age much faster than we lose strength. So to me, we're missing this altogether, and we have to have fitness professionals qualified to work with older adults and fitness professionals who understand power and how to train power. To me, this is very, very profound and very missing for older adults in our country. How about socially? Good social connections add how many years to life expectancy? What do you think? Take a wild guess. And how about this one? Loners have how many more times cancer than all other groups? What do you think? Good social connections, 9 years of life to life expectancy, and loners have 16 times more cancer than all other groups. That's dramatic, and I think with older adults living alone, we lose those social connections over time, and we may not have the skills or the ability to create new ones. Even in retirement communities, loneliness and isolation are prevalent. We tend to have parties, but that seems to just scratch the social surface, and we can all do better at creating deep social connections. And how about intellectually? Attributing forgetfulness to senior moments can exacerbate memory problems. This is for us, and this is for the older adults who we work with and care about. When stereotypes are negative about aging, when older adults are convinced becoming old means becoming useless, helpless, or devalued, they're more likely to suffer memory loss. That is powerful, and we can do something about that. One of our partnerships at Masterpiece Living is with the wonderful and kind and passionate Dr. Rob Winningham, and Dr. Rob's Cognitive Connection are fun, challenging brain games that we provide to our partners, and we are also providing them to you. In your handout, I've provided you the login information to our website to get directly to Dr. Rob's Cognitive Connections. So if you work in an organization, these are very fun games to play for team meetings, for icebreakers, and very fun ways to interact with older adults as well. So check that out. And finally, spiritual. Meaning and purpose means longevity, no matter when one finds it. So finding a direction for life and setting those overarching goals for what you want to achieve can actually help you live longer, regardless of when you find your purpose. And by and large, when older adults retire in our country, there goes their purpose. Not so in other countries, but absolutely true here. So the degree to which we can help older adults find purpose, the more likely they will live not only long, but well. To me, that research is very exciting and creates a lot of opportunity for us who have the privilege of interacting with older adults every day. The goal in our minds at Masterpiece Living, using that research as a foundation, we create environments where successful aging is more likely to happen, and we have to get out there and change society's views on aging, which are warped, as you know, and in doing so, we can change the experience of aging. But what are the barriers? Ageism in our society is so prevalent, and it's in our own minds too, because we are a product of our ageist society. We'll talk about those. Another barrier is low expectations and lack of a why not spirit. You know, the most, I think, effective people who work with older are those who came from an entirely different field or industry and didn't have that status quo about what older adults can or should do. And the most powerful question that those people in particular tend to ask is why not? And we can ask that question ourselves. Societal norms and societal status quo for older adults, those are all big barriers to the goal. But we have to remember that it's about progress, not perfection. And I think it's helpful to look around and look back into our not too distant history and ask ourselves about other major shifts in societal norms that have happened in the last 100 years. There are many. One of which is the disability movement. This is my brother-in-law, Matthew Beshwaite. He was born in 1960, and he was the last of 10 children born to my mother-in-law and father-in-law. And his older siblings taught him just the way they taught the ones that came before him. They interacted with him. They did not see him as different. They had very high expectations of his ability to learn and grow, as did my mother-in-law and father-in-law. He was not treated differently. And when my mother-in-law went to enroll Matthew into school, kindergarten, in 1965, as you might imagine, the school said, we don't take his kind. And she said, well, I'll be a part of the solution. I'll volunteer, work with, quote, his kind, so that the teachers, their time won't be taken away from other students. So my mother-in-law rejected status quo, and she was among those leading edge of women who did reject status quo at that time in the 1960s, and now our world is a very different place to live for these children with Down syndrome. So two parallels, I think, with what we're talking about with aging. One, rejecting status quo, and two, having that environment of high expectations. They, at some point midlife for Matthew, took his blood, and he was a part of research because he was so highly functional that they assumed that it must have been something genetic that set him apart from others with Down syndrome. And you know the answer to that. It was that no, his blood was not different, his genes were not different. It was simply environment and expectations that made him the effective, amazing person that he was. And despite being told he would never make it to 16, he lived until 53 and had a really wonderful and impactful life. And there are other stories of societal shifts in our country, but I think that one is a recent one and a great one. So we shift to talk a bit more now about ageism and ableism. So ageism, discrimination against a certain age group. Now that goes both ways, not only against older adults, but of anyone in a different generation. The interesting thing about ageism is it is prejudiced against our feared future self. None of us were going to catch Down syndrome or catch something like that, but when we look at people older than us, that could potentially be our future, and that can be scary for people. Whereas ableism is discrimination against people with differing abilities, disabilities. These are very prevalent in senior living communities and still, unfortunately, in our world. I know you know Kay Van Norman. She's a friend of mine, and she has presented on this very call in the past. And here's a story from an article she wrote called Expectations Drive Outcomes, powerful title. Irene, age 90, self-sufficient, but her daughter reports she's fallen a couple times, and she's been using the walls and furniture for support around her apartment for a while. She falls, breaks a hip, goes to the hospital, rehab, and returns home with a walker and a need for home care. No one is surprised. Irene was demonstrating signs of physical frailty, and no one did anything. Not the family, not Irene, not the doctors. Almost any condition would have been diagnosed and treated, but because everyone expected her to be frail at age 90, they treated it as normal and just watched it happen. Expectations are powerful. Here's an example of powerful expectations on the flip side. This is Roger Bannister. He was a physician, an academic, and an athlete. And around his time, it was believed that it was not possible to run a sub-4-minute mile. Roger Bannister did this, however, in 1954, ran a sub-4-minute mile. But his record lasted only 46 days, and soon many others were also running that sub-4-minute mile. It's about expectation. When we know it's possible, then we believe it can be done. Here are some wonderful photos this is from Rosewood Retirement Community. They're in Bakersfield, which is in Central California. They ask why not a lot around Rosewood, and they have an attitude of expectation for older adults. So they take residents scuba diving in their pool, and they every year have senior Olympic games, and they bring a rock wall. And you can see this beautiful picture of the woman in pink. She had very little use of her left side, and she rolled up to that rock wall in her wheelchair, and she was beaming. I happened to be standing there, and she said, "I want to climb." And the rock wall guy, you can see him behind her, he said, "Well, come on." He doesn't work in senior living. He has no preconceived notions about what older adults can or can't do or should or shouldn't be doing. And she climbed a couple steps that day, and that was a huge victory for her. So in the right environments, really wonderful things happen. In the wrong environments, what happens is we have an impact on health. When stereotypes are negative about aging, when older adults are convinced that becoming old means becoming useless or helpless or devalued, these negative outcomes happen. Less seeking medical care, poor physical functioning. They die earlier, and they're more likely to suffer memory loss. On the flip side, positive stereotypes, higher level of functioning, more likely to recover from a bout of disability. And look at this fairly recent orange paper from Mather Lifeways, positive perceptions of aging showing impact in all of these many areas. It's profound how we look at aging. Glass half empty, glass half full. It most certainly dramatically impacts our health and our longevity and quality of life. Let's do a quiz. Lowering blood pressure and cholesterol improves lifespan by how many years do you think? What would be your guess? Some of you have a handout already, so you can't cheat. Think about that. Okay, what's the answer? It's 4 years. How about this one? Exercise, maintaining proper weight, and not smoking have been found to add how many years to life? What do you think? Think about that in your mind for a minute. Take a guess. It's 1 to 3 years depending on the study. 1 to 3 years. Now how about this one? In a very old study, Becca Levi and colleagues, 20 years after the survey that they did, those who viewed aging more positively lived an average of how many years longer than those who were negative about it? What do you think? Take a guess in your mind. 7.5 years. Very, very profound. Very profound. And we can act on these findings. We can act on them by helping people create more positive views of aging. The challenge, though, is in increasing our own awareness about our deeply held beliefs about aging. We're a product of our ageist society. We have biases that we may not see. And similarly, fish don't know that they're in water, right? They live unaware of its existence because when a conduct is normalized by a dominant cultural environment, it becomes invisible. We just have to look harder, and we can do that. How can you tell what an organizational culture is, and how do you change and evolve an organizational culture or a societal culture? And the answer to both of those is language. We can be a change agent using language. You've seen this video, I bet. It's been around for a long time now. It's called The Power of Words. It's a great teaching tool if you're teaching about words and the impact on people and on organizational cultures. You may have read the book, How Full Is Your Bucket? It's been written for children now as well, but the original was as an adult book, and the concept is that every interaction with every single person that you come in contact with in a day has a positive or negative effect. It either fills their bucket or empties it. And the theory is that there are no neutral interactions, even as you hand your money to the person at the gas station. There's no neutral interactions. It's a great book. You might really enjoy it. And as we think about that and we think about the language that we choose, it reflects our attitudes and our beliefs and our values. Essentially, it reflects our culture organizationally and as a society. And language has the power to evolve those and shift those if we're careful about it and attuned to the language that we choose. This is a great image and certainly not scientific at all, but chances of success. Look at the differences from just I want to I think I can. Big jumps in the chances of success here, and this is powerful, right? This is really about self-efficacy, and we can impact that for older adults. In senior living communities, we've heard the word facility for a number of years, and that has become pretty rare now. Most are adopting the term community because, who wants to live in a facility anyway? And people are not waiting for regulations to evolve first. They are leading the charge and reframing the communities and renaming the various levels of living and moving away from that word care. Level of care even, and so lots of wonderful evolution happening. We still hear the word still though, don't we? He's still hiking at his age, he's still downhill skiing at his age, and that indicates surprise. It indicates that the default position is that aging should equal decline and that older adults should not be able to do those things and that they shouldn't be contributing to society. So still is a tricky word, and you see it a lot. And how about just? I'm just an older adult. I'm just a senior. I'm just a resident. Diminishing roles again. And this one is a biggie, senior moment. I bet many of us on this call have said it. I'm having a senior moment. And we just heard from the research that actually has an impact on our memory. So we have to be careful about this word senior moment. We all have those moments, no matter our age. And we use words to communicate about retirement communities. Our residents' well-being is our top priority. We know that the #1 reason people select a senior living community is the quality of care they receive. The ability to provide the most comprehensive and consistent personal care services begins with a resident evaluation process. This is community #1. Okay, that's something we found online, how they describe themselves. Here's community #2. We know that every resident has unique dreams and passions that continue to grow throughout life. That's why we work to create a place that goes well beyond physical support to a socially connected community with opportunities to challenge the mind, lift the spirits, revitalize purpose, and nurture the heart. That's community 2. Where do you want to live? Community 1 or 2? And you know what's interesting? There's no doubt in my mind that community number 2 provides all the same care that community number 1 provides. Probably community number 2 doesn't throw around the word evaluation all that much, because who wants to be evaluated? Just really unique ways to communicate about our communities and our cultures. We have to take this word senior moment and we have to change it, because if we don't, no one else will. Senior moments are those special moments, in my mind, that you probably experience in your day-to-day work. I would describe it as someone reaching in and touching my soul, and really an uplifting, wonderful moment. I think of them as the paychecks that actually matter the most to me. One of our communities in Texas has senior moments listed on every board meeting agenda. And during that time, they share the goodness, the wonderful things that are happening that are changing stereotypes about aging in their community. So we can redefine that term. And speaking of redefining and analyzing terms, this is in your handouts, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but think about what words and phrases are commonly used in your life, in your organization, and ask yourself, does it promote successful aging? Does it empower people? Is it about strength? Is it positive? And think about what words you'd like to evolve, right? We have to replace those old words with the new words in our own language and in our organizations, if that applies to you. So we just have a multiple step process here to evolving language, and that is in your handout. We can't forget to select those alternative words, and it feels contrived at first, but we want to try to replace our language with more positive words that are more likely to contribute to that environment of successful aging. I'd like to tell you briefly a little bit about what's happening at Masterpiece Living and in our network, and tell you what the data is saying, and share just a really quick success story. Human capital is really popular, and it's wonderful because, as you know, with older adults past retirement, we don't expect anything of them. We basically turn them out to pasture like horses, and their expertise and knowledge and wisdom it goes to waste. We don't ask for it, we don't seek it. And yet society has so many problems that could have been prevented by older adults human capital, or could be solved by older adults human capital. So what we are seeing in our partners is that identifying the human capital of older adults and then figuring ways to leverage it for the benefit of the greater community, the society around them. Very interesting efforts there. We're seeing fitness professionals be very qualified now to work with older adults and serving very specifically every level of living within communities. We're starting to see more and more data-driven brand promises. So, everyone says they have a wellness program. What does that even mean? Is it a fitness center? And if so, is it empty? Probably. So what we are seeing among our partners are they are marketing in very data-driven ways. People here are growing, and we can prove it, per level of living, per assisted living, per memory support. And that data is very powerful and very specific to successful aging. And we're seeing our partners get out beyond their walls, finally. We think we've been behind our walls for a long time. Getting out, spreading the message of successful aging to the people in their greater community, and positioning themselves appropriately so as experts in successful aging in the greater community. And then I would say the last thing that's trending is coaching, like, life coaching as a part of our daily interactions with older adults, and I'll touch on that more in a moment. When we look at our data over time, we see growth in those 4 components. So we know what we're doing is working. I want you to know that at baseline, these older adults are 83.5. And so we're showing that even in the 9th decade of life, growth is entirely possible and happening over the next few years. What I do not have time to tell you is that much about a project we did in affordable housing. This was thanks to a grant by the MacArthur Foundation and thanks to our partnership with our board members, Dr. Khan and Dr. Tony Antonucci at the University of Michigan. We got to take what we knew about successful aging, masterpiece living, and put it in affordable housing and see if it worked. We really didn't know because most of our partners had been more affluent CCRCs. And thanks to Beacon Communities, which is an ABHOW company, we were able to do a case control study to Southern California affordable housing communities on the control site about 20 minutes away. And the findings were so powerful. We could not have done this without support from New Step and Kaiser and Kay Van Orman's Brilliant Aging. And I can't get into the findings today, but I do want you to know that in general, extremely in general, not surprisingly, the residents of Casa and Fern maintained or got better, and the control site did not fare as well. And the other thing I want you to know is we finally had the opportunity to do dose response data, and it was so surprising to me how little effort an older adult would have to put forth to have statistically significant findings within those 4 components. It was incredibly sensitive, and that really surprised me. If you're interested in more about this, I have an entire article I wrote complete with all the data findings, and I'd be happy to send that to you. Just let Travis know that you'd like it, and I'll make sure that you have it. So that's the data, the aggregate findings, and then there's these stories about, gee, and I just heard this 2 weeks ago, thanks to Masterpiece and his supportive culture, he had lost 60 pounds and felt that he had improved his cognitive function, and then sadly he lost his wife just 2 months ago and is navigating it very healthfully, and he's a picture of resilience, and he attributes that to his supportive culture. So we know that where you live matters, clearly. Finally, I want you to have some actionable tools and ideas to inspire your clients to age more successfully, and that has to do with examining our own biases, and it has to do with some coaching dialogue that I'd love for you to try. This is really about you being that miracle grow in the lives of your clients and in the lives of those who you love. First and foremost, I'm sure you've seen this quote, we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are, and that is a powerful thing to remember with our interactions with older adults. We also know that when we look at older adults, it's a bit like looking at an iceberg in this way. We only see that tip of the iceberg, and yet there's so much more there, and we have to be curious about what we cannot see. This is certainly what society sees when they think about aging, when they think about older adults. The wheels of life, that pretty well describes how society sees us. But did you know that in the 65 and older age group that only 4% of people will ever even need a nursing home? And if you look at the 85 and up age group, only 10% of people will need a nursing home. But I bet all of your friends probably think that we're all destined to live in nursing homes, and that simply is not the truth. So as we can bust those myths out there in society, we can start to shape societal views. Here's the ageism litmus test. I learned this from Kay Van Orman, and I bet she probably taught it to you. This is how you tell very quickly if a statement is ageist. They can't because they're old. Take away old and fill in a gender. Fill in an ethnicity. Is it acceptable? Absolutely not. So if a gender is not an acceptable replacement for that word, then you know it simply is ageism and ageist, and you can quickly tell if that sentence is acceptable or not, right? So that's a quick test, and we have to respond. We hear ageism, we have to respond and start to shatter society's myths and help people recognize that ageism has to go. It's the last acceptable form of discrimination in our country, and it's got to go. It's a moral imperative for us who know the research that we have to act. And what does that look like in the day-to-day, in small ways? Partly it's addressing that ageism, and partly it's learning how to be a little more like coaches, a little more like life coaches in our day-to-day life. at Masterpiece Living and in our partner communities, what everybody does is they take a lifestyle review annually, and they get their individualized feedback report, and then they come to what we call a follow-up session. That's a coaching session where a person facilitates that who's trained by us to have future focused conversations with those older adults, and then after that they chart their own course. There's nothing prescriptive about this process. Older adults chart their own course. You can take a similar version of a lifestyle review. In Dr. Landry's book is a version, it's like a self-scoring version of the lifestyle review. And then the other element is outside of those formalized coaching sessions is that coaching every single day. And that's what I want to talk about here next. This is important. People tolerate your ideas, but they act on their own. And you know that that's very true in work and in life. And that's core to remember when we think about coaching. Again, we'll start with what it's not. It's not giving advice. It's not deciding right from wrong or imposing your own beliefs. It's not diagnosing. It's not suggesting treatments or medications. It's not fixing people. It's not plugging them into what you already offer. None of those things. It's not interrupting either. How long do most people listen before interrupting? Maybe you could test that out in your day-to-day life. It's less than 4 seconds. We are interrupters. Coaching it's serving another person. It's forming an alliance of equals between the coach and the person. It's exploring their motivation, and it's providing support and reinforcement. It's not doing it for them. It's helping them to maximize resources, and it's promoting individual responsibility. In other words, they do the work. You're the support. And it's good to check in sometimes and see how self-aware we are. Are we listening to respond, or are we really present in that moment, and are we just listening to understand? Are we listening to solve? Are we solvers? How much silence can we tolerate? Because you know what, if you ask someone a deep question, they're probably thinking. And that silence might be very uncomfortable, but it's critical to provide it. We are very tempted, because we all provide great services for older adults. We just want to plug them in to what we provide because we know that it's great. And we have to be careful. We have to let them find the path and chart their own course for what's important to them. And when we interact with older adults, are we in that old paradigm of let me do that for you, be careful, don't fall, let me protect you, let me help you adjust to the inevitable decline of aging? Or are we in the new paradigm of what do you want for yourself? How can I support you in making that happen? Are we in the new paradigm of the dignity of risk, allowing them to take risks that we could take ourselves? Those are critical questions. So I would ask that as you go about your day today and the rest of this week, that you ask yourself, all right, and ask others this question. Just try this one out for me. What do you want for yourself? Ask your kids that. Ask your clients that. Ask your colleagues that. What does that look like for you? It's a great follow-up question. What is important to you? We generally don't go with why. Why is that important to you? It puts people on the defense. You can go, what's important to you about that? How can I support you in making that happen? Keywords, you making that happen, not me doing it for you. So we can apply coaching dialogue, and there's much more in your handout than I'm sharing here. We can apply it professionally, and we can apply it personally. How do you know when you're being an effective coach? How do you know? Generally, you know when you are not doing all of the work. They're thinking, they're doing the work, and you are not doing most of the talking. The person you're coaching is doing most of the talking. That's when you know. So it's a great quote from Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And that's a great quote as we think about how the research has changed everything that we know. And the more we can apply that research, that's us doing better. The paradigm is shifting, And we know the research is telling us that there's a better way to care for older adults. It's the new paradigm. And as the more we grow and the more we know about how to best support them to help them live well and die short, the more that we can do. Staying current is critical. I know that you all do stay current in your respective fields. If you want to read a bit more about these topics that we've touched on today, Lisa and I collectively have read all of these books, and we find them to be great reads for your long winter nights coming here. So we provide you these as our suggestions of great books to read. And then just in terms of following researchers and bloggers and thought leaders, Dr. Landry is about successful aging. Dr. Winningham, I mentioned, about cognitive stimulation. In terms of ageism, Becca Levi, Ellen Langer, and specifically very fierce ageism blogger and author is Ashton Applewhite. We always follow Dr. Harold Koenig about spirituality and aging, and then Bill Thomas is another who you might already follow about changing aging in general. So, and there's many, many more, but I just wanted to give you a short list here. So what can we do to begin changing aging and being a part of this movement of successful aging in our country? We can be more alert to ageism in ourselves and being more alert to hearing it in our culture, and we can stop buying those ageist greeting cards, and we can respond when we hear ageist comments. We can practice some of the coaching dialogue. See your handout. There's lots of interesting questions. You'll be surprised at the responses. We can be alert to our own language, and we can continually evolve it and be very in tune to our biases. And we must believe in your client's ability to age successfully no matter what. And we can be their supportive environment, their miracle grow. And finally, we can live a successful aging lifestyle ourselves. There's always something we can do to grow in one of those 4 areas. Masterpiece Living is based in Denver, Colorado, actually in Lakewood, Colorado, very close to Denver. And here we've used our words to describe our organizational culture, which we are very proud of. It's a wonderful place to work. And so I wanted to share that we have 2 career opportunities now at Masterpiece Living, and you can learn more on our website. And at this point, Travis and Lisa, I'd love to open it up for a couple of questions. I realize we only have 5 minutes to go.
At this time, I have not received any questions from anyone. Thank you, Teresa. And Lisa, I don't know, did you have anything to add at this time?
I think Teresa has done a great job telling the story of successful aging, and I truly hope that this has been a rewarding and thought-provoking webinar for everybody, and I do wish everyone luck and success in their own successful aging journey. And thank you, Travis and Teresa.
Thank you. My pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Lisa, for putting this together for us. And thank you so much for taking part in this special edition of the CSA webinar, and we hope you'll join us again next time.